Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Back to the G20. As we draw the curtains on the meeting between the world's 20 largest economies and the streets are swept clean from the several days of riots, these 20 Gs head home. That picture just proves that Angela Merkel is still the OG. But after it's all over, we're left with the question, what the heck just happened? The G20 had some big challenges. Meaningful reforms on climate change, a coordinated response to the Syrian crisis, comprehensive solutions for refugees, immigration, and terrorism. But when 20 world leaders with individual agendas all got in the same room, let's just say they made incremental progress at best. Outside the meetings, there were protests. Some of them got a little crazy. And most threatening of all, clowns. But worse than the protests were the media, which treated us to non-stop G20 body language analysis. Because who wouldn't want to spend days carefully scrutinizing these bodies of old politicians in suits? What's that, Shelley? There's G20 fan fiction? Wait, no, don't tell me. Back to non-traumatizing physical contact between world leaders. There's the all-important handshake. Clearly, Trump won the handshake with Putin. Clearly, Putin won the handshake with Trump. Wait, that's still unclear. But remember in January when the world first learned of the Trump handshake? That awkward handshake where he pulls the guy towards him? Well, let's just say China has been learning from the West. Speaking of China won big at the G20. There was no conflict over the South China Sea and no criticism of China's human rights abuses. I think this clip illustrates the level of tension.
The wish was expressed that this time I would bring with me 2 panda bears. I gave a positive answer.
So Xi Jinping brought pandas to Germany that China will loan to the Berlin Zoo for $1 million a year for the next 15 years, and then China will demand the pandas and all their offspring back. Pandas, yay! But anyway, on to less black and white issues. As I mentioned earlier, during the G20, the US and China did meet. And it looked like everyone had so much fun. They discussed 2 main issues. 1, Trump wants China to stop its unfair trade practices with the US. We know that because Twitter. And 2, Trump wants China to stop trading at all with its nuclear-armed neighbor. Oh, sorry, I meant the one with the dangerous leader. No, the fat dangerous leader. Yeah. And again, because Twitter. But despite Trump's increasing frustration that Chinese leaders haven't done more to help with North Korea, Trump remained cordial at the meeting, telling Xi that he appreciated what he had done relative to the very substantial problem that we all face in North Korea. So against all odds, could their friendship live on? In April, they bonded over dessert.
And we had the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake that you've ever seen.
Most beautiful piece of cake? I'd beg to differ. But anyway, what if the US-China cake-based friendship starts to crumble? Well, that's why Trump may be trying to improve ties with Russia. No, I'm not talking about Trump Jr. President Trump is trying to improve bilateral ties with President Putin. This marks a departure from previous US policy. Wait, we can do stuff to you? Was Obama flirting? What's that, Shelley? No, I haven't been reading more fan fiction. Who would write fan fiction about politicians anyway? What does this have to do with China, you ask? Well, over the past several years, Russia and China have supported each other, economically and politically. Both hold permanent member seats on the UN Security Council. They've used that platform to block democratic nations from certain objectives. For example, putting sanctions on Syria. And most recently, efforts to target human traffickers. If Trump is indeed planning to put more pressure on China, then a friendly, or at least neutral Russia could be to America's advantage. When President Richard Nixon visited China in 1972 to establish ties, his goal was to give the US leverage over Russia, then part of the Soviet Union. It worked. It would be somewhat ironic if President Donald Trump's warming relationship with Russia is now aimed at giving the US leverage over China. You know, it could be working when Chinese state-run media say, fine, I don't care. Of course, that doesn't guarantee that Russia wouldn't try to be buddy-buddy with both China and the US. After all, the Chinese regime is doing its best to promote a positive image of Putin on social media. But take it from me, it never works when you try to have two best friends. To be clear, I'm not saying that the US should definitely cozy up to Russia. For one, Russia is an authoritarian state that has done a lot of questionable things. Not that that stopped the US from working with other authoritarian countries. And two, the Trump administration's growing Russia problems might make it difficult for them to have a strong relationship. But the Trump administration may still try, because you know what they say. The frenemy of my frenemy is my frenenemy. So we'll be keeping an eye on how the world's superpowers are shifting the balance after the G20, at least in the fan fiction. Speaking of frenenemies, China and Vietnam. We'll have more after the break. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. It happened! Oh my gosh, it actually happened. Even they looked surprised. As for Canada's Justin Trudeau, well, sometimes it's best not to read too much into the body language. There's probably fan fiction about this, isn't there? Anyway, if you want to see the full half-hour episode right now, go to ChinaUncensored.tv.